Well, a wonderful good morning to you, Grenada, Carrick, Pity Mountain, the Eastern, the rest of the Eastern Caribbean, to you wherever you are. It is Thursday. It is the third day of the month of March, and indeed it's a pleasure being here with you on this wonderful, really wonderful Thursday morning. We want to say welcome to our listeners, wherever you are. Those of you that's on Classic 105.5 and 105.9 on the FM band. We say thank you for being part of this broadcast. Our listeners, our viewers that's just joining us on television. That's 105, that's on television, Channel 7, Channel 11, and Channel 20. Indeed, it's a pleasure being here with you. And I say good morning to our viewers on the different social media platforms, be it our Facebook page, or those of you joining us via the World Wide Web at www.gbn.gd. And it is a pleasure being here with you, and we say thanks for being part of the broadcast. I'm Joseph Cadore, and we say I want to invite you and say a special good morning to you wherever you are. My guest this morning from the Detective Corporal Terrell Jackasal from the Royal Grenada Police Force. And good morning to you, sir. Welcome to The Point. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning to you and to the listening public.
Thank you. It's indeed a pleasure having you here with us as we accommodate you on every Thursday. This morning we're going to, I normally say that, there's some conversations, detective, that is, I refer to them as sexy conversations. People hear them and they go, yippee, and it gets everybody's attention. And then others, you hear it and they start thinking, keeping my property safe, tips for doing those things. People tend not to think about it until something unfortunate happens.
Until something happens,
and then they're forced to deal with the reality. But maybe, if I had listened to Detective Corporal Jackasal when he was speaking with JC on the 3rd of March, then maybe I was going to remember some of those things. One of the things I've learned as part from thanks to you guys, the crime triangle, and I think it'd probably be a nice place to start the conversation. So again, remind me and remind the rest of Grenada as we get into the topic of keeping your property safe, tips on doing that. What exactly is the crime triangle and how it facilitates?
Sure. Okay, good morning to you and to the listening public again. Well, first of all, what is a crime? A crime is really a breach of law for which a penalty is attached. Okay, this morning we're speaking about property crimes, and we just want to mention what exactly are some of the property crimes. Property crimes are crimes such as housebreaking, burglary, stealing, trespass, damage to property, inter alia. Now, you mentioned the crime triangle. The crime triangle, according to crime prevention specialists, is a triangle which represents three elements which have to be present in order for a crime to be committed. So at the top of the crime triangle, you have the target or the victim. And on the bottom parts of the triangle, you have, at one side, you have the culprit or the offender, and on the other side, you have the situation or the opportunity. So again, according to crime prevention theorists, there has to be these three elements present for a crime to be committed. Okay? Now, the goal of crime prevention is really to disrupt the triangle. It's all about reducing your chances of becoming a victim, increasing the chances of the offender being caught, and basically to disrupt the situation or the opportunities made available for a crime to be committed. So that's a crime triangle in short.
You disrupt any one of those elements and a crime, and of course you reduce or you remove the occasion for a crime to happen. But I can see someone saying to themselves, what can I do? How can I'm not in control of any of those elements. Is that in any way true?
Yes, you actually are in control of certain things. Well, except the culprit or the offender.
Right.
All right. You're not in control of that person's intent, but you are in control of your own self, and you are in control to some degree the opportunities that are made available. And that's where we talk about crime prevention. What is crime prevention? Crime prevention is all about avoiding or stopping a crime from being committed. As I mentioned, disrupting the crime triangle. The goal of crime prevention is to reduce your risk of becoming a victim and reducing the opportunities of the offender to take advantage of you or your property. Now, if we were to jump right in, some of the strategies that can be employed to prevent or to disrupt the crime triangle, we have different strategies. For example, we have target hardening. Now, target hardening is making it more difficult for an offender to commit a crime. And that is totally within your control as a victim or a possible target. And we're going to explain some ways that we can get that done shortly. We also have target removal, which is reducing the payoff for the offender. For example, if you operate a business and you collect cash, you might have your cash tills available and within view of a potential offender. And we're simply saying that you just have to remove the cash till from public view, place it on your counter or hide it altogether so that it doesn't attract or it doesn't provoke that intent of an offender. All right. We also have things like removing the means to commit a crime. Now, for example, persons might have a ladder outside of their house. A ladder is a potential tool that an offender can use to place against your house to enter your house. Another crime prevention strategy, we have that of surveillance. Surveillance by whether the use of a camera system or whether you your own self as the potential target or victim, just making checks on your property. It's important. So as you can see, there are ways that you can actually control and disrupt that crime triangle.
Ever since growing up, my mother always said to me, don't be careful, especially that people get used to your schedule, that they can determine when you're in, when you're out. They can determine that once they see X element leaves, the house is empty. Yes. Those are things, as best as you can, you want to disrupt. Well, it may probably have to force you to think otherwise, but certainly it must be given consideration. Timing and schedule. Yes.
What you mentioned is very important. Now, there are offenders who would go around on a daily basis during the course of the daytime, and they would drive through different places, neighborhoods, and they would look at the different houses. Now, if you're out of state, one thing that would alert an offender that you are not home and there is nobody looking after the property would be an unkept yard. So I'm driving through, I'm the offender, and I notice that your yard is unkept. The bush is high and everything, then I know for sure no one is home. Additionally, some persons use the Facebook and, they advertise where they are. When they're not home, they advertise they're going down the road, they advertise when they're out of state and everything. That's also another way that an offender can know whether or not anyone is home. So those things persons have to pay attention to. Also at night, if you leave the house at night, you may not leave a light on because you're trying to conserve energy.
Right.
An offender driving through or walking past your neighborhood could know that you're not at home just by you not having any lights. And of course, it's an attraction. Someone could go into your premises, especially if it's not fenced, and just have a peek through the window, and then they would know whether or not no one is home. Okay, so these are some of the things that can attract someone and make them have knowledge that someone is not there tending to their property. So it would be wise to manage your property, clearing the bush. If you're not not within the state, you have someone to clean your premises for you. So at least it looks as if it's being well kept and someone is at least checking on the property.
And depending on where you live, to detective, you may always want to make sure that you remove any opportunities for persons to conceal themselves on the outside. You might tell yourself, well, where I live, it protects me from my neighbor seeing inside. But you can't see them, they can't see you. It's got something provide an opportunity for concealment.
Yes, if you have a lot of bush and trees around your house and it's not properly kept, especially again if the area is not well lit at night, you don't have any peripheral lighting, it's very easy for someone to hide in an area and observe when you leave in your house. And we have had instances where some offenders, they hide in the bushy areas, there's no lighting, so you come out of your house and you can't see. You don't know what's across the road. And they would sit and they would observe and they would know when you leave your house. And based on how you're dressed and so forth, they would have an idea as to how long you would be leaving your house for. And then they could use the opportunity to enter and do what they have to do. So it's very important to keep your surroundings clean and so forth and well lit.
And you would agree, Detective, that the good old tell your neighbor, good neighbor approach, that sometimes serves as the best deterrent for crimes anyway.
Yes, you're getting into another triangle called the crime prevention triangle, where there are three elements to that. One of the elements being law enforcement and other criminal justice agencies, one element being the public at large, and one element being the policymakers. Now, if I were to narrow down on the public at large, we would talk about community involvement, community policing, we talk about neighborhood watch programs.
Right.
All right? They are very important. The community has a very critical role to play in the control of crime. Okay? In every society, crime will most likely to occur. The police alone and the policymakers alone and other criminal justice agencies alone cannot control crime. We need the assistance and the cooperation from the public to ensure that crime is controlled. All right? So it's very important for persons to establish neighborhood watch programs. There are a lot of gated communities. These gated communities, they have neighborhood associations. They need to look at employing neighborhood watch programs. I watch your back, you watch mine. When I'm not home, you throw an eye on my place for me.
Right.
And if you see anybody strange in the area, you can take out your phone and you can record that person. You can take a picture and you can report the matter. You know, officer, there is a strange person in my neighborhood. He's dressed X particular way. I took a video. Do you have a WhatsApp I can forward it to? And if they forward it to us, we have a look and we check it out. All right, and you will find that a lot of these instances, when persons do that, the crime will be less.
And certainly, just for the purpose, people that know, because we're a small community, people often feel that they're invading somebody else's space, but you can't ever assume anything, Detective, especially at nights, or if you see, as you intimated, a strange face in your neighborhood, just carelessly up and down the street, wantonly, or probably I had an occasion recently. I went inside in my veranda and I see this gentleman just sitting there. I thought he was sheltering the rain. I went back outside half an hour. I see him moving on the other side. Right. I mean, I'm decided, you know what? Just let me know. So I reached out to him. He's sheltering the rain. Bro, if you shelter in the rain, I don't have a problem with that. I don't see the reason why you need to be going in the back end of my property.
Exactly.
And I subsequently called the police, and it may have been turned out to be nothing, but I must say, I called and they did actually respond to it. You can't assume
that's good. Yeah, that's good. You see, a lot of times, and there are a lot of situations where, for example, you as a concerned citizen, you may be living in a gated area, you may be driving your vehicle on your way home, you may see someone who, to you, is a new face. You don't know that person. That person might well be living in the same area as you. There's nothing wrong in making a report to the police that you've seen someone that you don't recognize in your area. There's nothing wrong. We will not recommend engaging persons because you don't know who it is that you're going to be engaging. But everyone has a phone. You can take your phone out, try to record something from a distance, and you inform. This is why we are here. We are here to protect and serve through delivery of professional services to ensure a safe society. So we would recommend persons need to report or then pass information. So I previously mentioned, we rely on the open line of communication from the members of the public. It's very critical.
We may have occasions where, and yesterday we were going on Market Hill, and I had to call a friend of mine. I saw a vehicle parked, and while we're talking about property, but even your vehicle, it becomes your property as well. It might be parked on the side of the road or wherever it is in your yard, and her bag was open on the front seat, and I had to call her. Where are you? Those detective, you would say that is a no altogether. Avoid that as much as possible.
Yes, there are some situations that we really cannot control, right? However, we would say that it's very important to deter persons, all right? And I could mention the 4 Ds of crime prevention at this stage, where you have deter, detect, deny, and delay. All right. In areas where you have to go to the beach and you have to pack your vehicle, we could recommend not leaving valuables in your vehicle. You walk with it to the beach, you have it with you, you leave it within plain sight. At least if you have someone on the shore with you, who can look at your property for you. If in case you have to leave your property in your vehicle, ensure that it's in a place where it's well secured. Maybe under the seat, you need to know the vehicle you have and have a secret place in your vehicle where you could store something in case you would be away from your vehicle for a long time. A lot of vehicles now have alarm systems. So you lock your vehicles, as long as someone breaks the glass or something like that, the alarm will go off. And even the older models of vehicles, there are security specialists now in the country who can install a security system. You can order these things online and you can install it yourself or so forth, and just have an extra added security. Okay. Keeping things away from view is very important. If someone is passing by your vehicle, it's parked somewhere. Sometimes you might go to let's say a party or so at the night and you park up on the roadside. Someone is passing randomly, they may just look into your vehicle, and because you have the item exposed, they're going to try to enter your vehicles. All right. And you would also be surprised the number of persons who actually forget to lock their vehicles when they come out of it as well.
Yes.
So these are also important. You check to ensure that the vehicle is locked, and that's one way to sort of secure yourself from a property crime, stealing, i.e. stealing. Also, if you're based on where you're going to, if you're going to the beach or if you're going to wherever it is a function, you may not need to walk with your laptop or something expensive. You may not need to walk with those things. You may not need to leave a large amount of cash, or even some persons who might have, for example, a firearm and these sort of things. You don't need to leave these things in a vehicle. For persons who might have, for example, a firearm, you come to the nearest police station, you secure it, then you go to your party, you come and collect it back when you're finished. These sort of things can help to prevent certain occurrences of stealing offenses.
We know, detective, that criminals, they become much more daring. They plan, and there's some crimes that are planned. There are those that happens on the spur of the moment, an opportunity arises, and the person they just leap into action. But I've heard of cases where individuals, they go and they do surveillance, real big time surveillance, detective, where they will literally come to you pretending maybe that they looking for somebody, and they literally come to your house, knock on your door. What sort of advice would you offer to the general public if you become suspicious?
Yes, no, there are cases that, as you mentioned, someone might come knock to your door, they might ask you if you have work, they might ask you to maybe pick some fruits or, whatever the case might be. We have had instances like that. Now, in cases where you cannot prevent this from the crime triangle, in those situations where you have a daring an offender, the law, Title 7 of the Criminal Code, speaks towards justifiable force and harm. Now, persons do have a right to defend themselves and their property.
Right.
All right. And in cases, for example, if there's a house break-in, someone breaks into your house and let's say you and the person end up in a scuffle and you begin to fight and whatever it is. The law does cover you in case certain harm is caused to that intruder, even to the point where the person loses their life. The law may look at your situation and say that your force to that situation was justified. If someone is breaking in and you see someone is at least maybe trying to enter your house through the window, and maybe you have a piece of wood or something close by, a baseball bat, you could cause harm to that person, but it's not supposed to be extended to a wound or a grievous harm. So there are different explanations under Title 7 of the Criminal Code that could explain the amount of harm that you can cause to someone who's trying to enter your place. So persons do have that right to defend themselves on the property.
And we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I know I can see some viewers and listeners saying, "Officer, you crazy, a meet of mine." Believe me, my instinct is to take him out. But why don't you offer some example? I know we're a very cultured, open society. Somebody comes to you, they seem nice and friendly. They're looking for somebody in the neighborhood, and they may ask you if they can have a drink of water. And we very seldom just without even thinking, "Oh, come in."
Yes.
Should that be? I mean, people might be thinking that's what makes us Grenada, but our society is evolving.
Yes, society is evolving, and whenever you have, for example, development in a society, the more a country develops, the more there would be increases of crime, is the more likelihood of persons reoffending. And there are a lot of other areas that you need to look at, poverty levels and a lot of host of things, that we will need to look at. This society, Grenada is a very lovely place. We would say that. We have a lot of tourists coming in, a lot of persons love our country. We have the warmest and friendliest set of people. However, yes, we do have persons who are intended on committing crimes. Persons need to be aware of instances where you will see a stranger and be friendly to them. Everyone would act according to their own experience.
Right.
Someone who would normally be friendly to a person and has an incidence of a robbery, for example, after that person is not thinking the same. So, I cannot discourage persons from being friendly, but I can tell them, be careful. There is something called profiling. Reading, going on the internet and checking out things is very important. At least you could have an idea of the way a person is dressed. There are some persons who they know how to walk around these things. Some offenders are very experienced. They know how to dress as, for example, someone for a job. They may come with a weeditor and they want to walk and they have the whole outfit.
Right.
They don't know what their intention is. Right? But what we can say in instances like that, what could help is, for example, if you have a camera system set up and something like that happens, the police could know who it is that came onto your property.
Right.
Right. So you have to be mindful and think crime-wise and anti-crime-wise to know how to protect yourself and to keep yourself, to minimize those opportunities. Right?
And being street smart, being savvy is always important. So somebody comes to you and they say to you, they do landscaping. And as you say, they look the part, they're in an overall, and they look as though, well, that's what they do. You probably can always ask them, who else in the neighborhood? That who's cut. That sort of thing.
Yes.
And reach out to
them. Yes, of course. It's very good to have conversations with people. You quiz them, you ask them questions.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, your intuition is going to guide you that something is not right with that person.
Yeah.
And that's just a psychological, a human response. Something along the line is going to tell you. And personally, to listen to their intuition and trust their instinct. All right, we have survival instincts. When you're speaking to someone, something would sound out of place. You might ask them for a business card. You might ask them for a phone number. You might, as you said, how many jobs have you done in this neighborhood? Who do you know? What's your name? Where are you from? Do you have an ID? These sort of things. If someone comes in, try to at least get a name of the person and so forth. It's very important. Again, cell phones. You take a video. You record the conversation with you and the person. And if you have a suspicion in your mind, you can send it out maybe to your association. Someone might say, hey, this is a known criminal, a known offender, and then you will know and be able to circulate that, within your neighborhood that this person here is going around, and you could disseminate that information. So persons need to think like that nowadays. Yeah.
Normally they say when your neighbor house is on fires, you fire your wet ears. When your community is in danger, you should become a little bit more cautious and sensing your sensitivity to what's happening around you. 25 minutes gone past the hour in the morning. It is to the point for the 3rd of March. My guest this morning, Detective Corporal Terrell Jackasal from the Royal Grenada Police Force. We'll take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back right here on To The Point.
Join GBN on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. for Interesting Grenadians, a program that showcases the lives of interesting and outstanding Grenadians at home and abroad. It's Interesting Grenadians every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on GBN. Don't you miss it.
Get ready for a season of grooving smooth and live on GBN. Grooving Smooth and Live is a 1-hour performance gig every Thursday from 8 p.m. featuring performances from our local musicians and short interviews discussing all things musical. Every Thursday, a different musician and a different instrument will be featured, from the violin to the saxophone to the trumpet, guitar, and steel pan. Our local musicians playing, improvising, and educating us on all genres of music. Join GBN with host musicians Matthias and Shireen and a special guest every Thursday at 8 p.m. It's Grooving Smooth and Live on GBN.
It's 28 minutes gone past the hour in the morning time. It's to the point for today, the 3rd day of the month of March. We have a caller that is on the line. Good morning, caller. You are live.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
An observation, couple observation, not to be critical or anything like that. I am moving away from the radio while I speak. I thought I was far enough away. Sorry about that. Anyway, there are certain things that, for example, you have a couple of dogs in your yard. It never leave your property. Somebody come there to steal, and your dog bite them or whatever. You are responsible. You are in trouble, and also because you are not supposed to have quote-unquote bad dogs, whatever, but that is your protection because you cannot afford these fancy cameras, surveillance equipment, etc. That is one thing. Another thing, I know the police, it is impossible for any police in any country to attend to every infraction, etc. But there are a few times when police could make an example of someone that may deter others. There a neighbor of mine cleans his place with a weed eater. He doesn't do it, I guess he hires someone. On several occasions I asked them the weed whacker, weed eater as we call it, so it slams a lot of stones and so against my glass window. So a lot of debris on my roof, dirty my guttering, etc. I told them nicely, politely about it. The ceases stop. He tell me, if I have a problem, tell the people who doing it. I told the owner of the place, etc. Nothing do. I called the police on 5 occasions while it was going on. No one attended it. It is illegal, one, to remove the protective shield on your weed whacker, and secondly, to extend the cord that you used to really cut the grass or whatever or 99.999% of the people do that, thereby rendering this thing a weapon. I have a friend who was just passing along with his glass down in his vehicle, and he was whacked above the eye with a pebble from the weed whacker.
Okay.
The police tell him all kind of thing what he have to do, and they did nothing about it. He go straight to them, come and tell them. You cannot go. Definitely, there's no way in the world you can go to all weed whacker all over the country and do it. Can John Doe make an example of him, advertise it that he have been charged, jailed, whatever is the magistrate did to him for using a weed whacker indiscriminately. Okay. It is not meant as a criticism, it's an observation.
Okay, sure.
And you also look into a few things like that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Detective, is that something you can comment on?
Can you just go over what exactly? I wasn't hearing too clearly.
Okay, so there's two issues that he raised. The use of the weed eaters, indiscriminate use of weed eaters. And believe me, I mean, that's a common one. Indiscriminate use of the weed eaters and how law enforcement would treat with that. Under the law, how does the law govern that? And he also made a reference of the use of dogs as a form of protection and security. What happens if somebody comes onto your premises and they're bitten by the dogs? He's claiming, he's in his estimation, you should be protected under the law. Once it happens within the confines of your property, if they accessed it without your permission. Yes? So those are
yes. Well, firstly, in relation to the weed eaters, of course, there is some concern as to how the weed eaters are used. Now, I think that the relevant ministry and personnel will have to look at that and have some health and safety measures in place to govern the use of persons with the weed eaters. The policymakers will have to look at that, at least coming up with some new sanctions and regulations as to how persons should use weed eaters, especially in the public roads and so forth.
Right.
Because a weed eater could cause damage to someone's vehicle, and then we have to go through that process to determine whether or not the damage was intentionally and unlawfully caused, negligently and or otherwise, whether or not the person would be held accountable and those sort of things, whether they could be criminally charged. So based on a case-by-case basis, it would be looked at. Right. So that's my comment in relation to that. Now, as it concerns dogs.
Well, let me ask you before you go on to dogs, though. I know there's the argument not just of the use of the weed eaters and how they're used, but the use of the supported safety net.
Yes. But in the bigger countries, I know that when I visited Trinidad one time,
yes, right there.
I noticed that they have the nets, they have the vests. The health and safety measures in those countries are, taken very seriously.
Right.
For some reason, it's a bit toned down in Grenada for whatever reason. But health and safety is extremely important. A weed eater could actually cause a stone to hit your eye, and then you would have one eye for the rest of your life. And what sort of compensation would be given to you? What sort of penalty would be imposed on the person causing the issue? Weed eaters, I really think that, as the caller mentioned, it's something that really needs to be looked at. Okay, whether a team needs to be put in place to examine the health and safety protocols for landscapers,
right.
Whether or not the policymakers need to implement something in relation to govern the use of landscaping instruments and health and safety measures and so forth, whether or not there is something already in place. I'm not sure. But yes, it really needs to be looked at from that standpoint.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks. Yeah,
the dogs issues. There is an act, Dangerous Dogs Act, that governs the use of dogs. The dog's supposed to be on a leash, it's supposed to be within an enclosed compound, and so forth. Now, if someone comes onto your property, it could be a friend, or someone just, maybe let's say the postman or the person checking the Nawasa line, or the Grand Leg person, and your dog bites them. Now, although it may fall into a sort of a civil lawsuit realm of things, there could be a criminal element to it based on whether or not you fall within the confines of the Dangerous Dogs Prevention and Control Act. All right, so that's another topic, but there are things that has to be done. You're not supposed to have certain type of dogs in your possession. The dog's supposed to be on a leash. They're supposed to be within an enclosed premises. If you have them, let go. Okay, and you're supposed to have a sign and certain things like that fall into place. But if all of that is in place and someone comes into your property for the intention of committing a crime and the dog bites them, then that person shouldn't be there. I'm not saying that you as the owner may not be held accountable for one way or the other, but the law will govern your use of having dogs in a situation like that.
Right. 25 minutes on to the hour. We have another caller on the line. Good morning, caller.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I really appreciate this program this morning. This is something I've been advocating for years. Even I work in the years also. I'm not there anymore, but I want a person that help to push and help the safety down there. I don't even think this is not even taking it serious. And that's continue to talking about it.
Okay.
It's a fact. If you have a roof against something and the damage, that causes a company to shut down. I grew up in a life insurance, and I can remember from school, primary school, taught health and safety in case I got taken as a child. I take it. So when you watch people in road there in Grenada, a road to take two vehicles, but then a road in this time and age, one vehicle to get a pull yard and all that in this time and age. So look at all the time. Still, you finish the road, and you come and put the mechanic road, and he pack up all his vehicles for sale and all. They pack in this, and then we're talking about law. Okay, so this, I really appreciate that level of conversation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. 435-2041, that's the number to get in on the inside. You can also post your comments via our WhatsApp portal, number 435-2041. In case you're just joining us, my guest this morning is Detective Corporal Terrell Jackasal of the Royal Grenada Police Force. Detective, so we have established a lot of things, the 4Ds of crime, a lot of different elements of it. Help us to get an appreciation for the internal processes. If I get home, how we should deal with it. I get home and I notice that for some reason my home somebody has intruded on my property. What should be the response?
Yes, you touch a very important point. Now, a lot of persons, they contaminate crime scenes and make it difficult for us to solve the crime. So if you come home and you realize that you are the victim of a house breaking, whether your window, whatever it is broken, items are missing, first thing you do is you remove yourself from that area. So you step in, as you step in, you step back out. Second step, you call the police. Don't touch anything, you leave everything as is. All right? Now, it's very important because we may have to dust for fingerprints. We may have to dust for footprints. If you enter, the first thing you might want to check is to see if have my money or whatever it is, right, this is there, things like that, valuables. Try to resist the urge, because as fast as you're walking about, you're contaminating the crime scene, and we may not be, you lessen our chances of solving that crime and catching that culprit. So, number one advice, avoid touching anything, resist that urge, to contact the police immediately. Right. And as you contact the police, I'll give you some contact numbers later on. The police is going to tell you what to do. So as soon as you speak to a detective, we're going to tell you the same thing. Don't touch anything. Resist the urge to walk about and check. Are we going to be there within due time and process the scene? After we process and clear the scene, then we're going to allow you to do what you have to do.
Okay. I have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller. Good morning, caller. You're live. We seem to have lost that caller. A comment, detective, on social media. I think we started touching it again. And the person responds, I'm smiling, but I want us to revisit it. Somebody enters your property, and this person is saying, and I think instinctively, that's what we all say. We've all said it. I meet an intruder at my home, we already tell ourselves everything that we are going to do to that individual, and then call the police.
Yes.
What should be, and we want to do it logically, because people are thinking, man, listen, what should be my response? I get up in the middle of the morning. And we've been practical, so not being home is one thing. But I wake up in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I notice that there's an intruder in my home.
Right. So the law, as I said, mentioned Title 7 under the Criminal Code, justifiable force and harm. Now, the instinctive thing to do, the instinctive urge, the instinctive response would be, of course, fight or flight. That would definitely instinctively come on, but then you have to remember there are repercussions according to law. So let me just speak towards Section 62, right? Which speaks of the use of force.
Repercussions. Repercussions from me meeting a man in my home 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, just
based on the circumstances, there can be. Now, Section 62 of the Criminal Code speaks about the use of force for prevention and defense against crime. Okay, so there's a part that speaks for the prevention of or for the defense of himself or any other person against any of the following crimes. A person may justify any necessary force or harm extended in the case of extreme necessity, even to killing. And then you have the list, namely treason, piracy, murder, manslaughter, robbery, burglary, housebreaking, arson of a dwelling house or vessel, rape, dangerous or grievous harm, and forcible unnatural crime. All right? So there are circumstances where the level of force may be justified in those instances. Section 63 goes to speak about the use of force for defense of property or possession or overcoming obstruction of legal right. Now, there's a part that says a person may justify the use of force for the defense of property or possession or for overcoming obstruction, and it says a person in actual possession of a house, land, vessel, or goods, or his servant, or any other person authorized by him, may use such force, not extending to a wound or grievous harm, as is necessary for repelling a person who attempts forcibly and unlawfully to enter the house, land, or vessel, or to take possession of goods. So in these circumstances, you hear the law speaks about using force not extending to a wound or grievous harm. So based on the circumstance, there are different situations where harm would be lawful. But based on the situation and circumstance, again, harm would not be lawful. So it's a case-by-case basis. There was one case one time where a gentleman entered a house in an area to the south of the island. He encountered a resistance. They began to fight, and that person, the intruder, would have lost his life. I believe a coroner's inquest, an inquiry was done, and the person was deemed to be justified for that amount of force that person used. All right, so there is case-by-case basis. Now, if you see someone in your vehicle, you lock your vehicle, and you meet the person trying to steal something, based on, your facts at the time, based on your observances, what you observe, you can use harm to repel that person to prevent them from stealing your property.
Right.
If they run and you run behind them and, you catch them, you can use certain harm, not extending to force or grievous harm, to retrieve your property. But then, if you decide to go overboard and you beat the person up, or whatever it is, or a person already breaks your place and they leave running, and you chase them down and you meet them and you beat them up,
right,
you may be held accountable for cause. That person could make a complaint against you and you could get charged for causing harm. So
quite interested. I have a caller on the line detective.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking my call.
Good morning, sir. Yes, go ahead.
I would like to applaud the police officer on the topic of the weed test. I am an individual who is now in a wheelchair and, most times on my bed. Once every month, where I live here in Pedmota, there's an aisle called the transformer. And there Three guys that come here once every month to weed eat that aisle. Now, on my bed...
Caller, I'm not sure where you are, but I'm getting... There's a feedback. There's a terrible... We're getting this feedback from something.
I am kind of far away, so I may have to cut off and call back.
43520 we do apologize for that, but the feedback, it really compromises the quality of the broadcast. Again, those on the inside, you can post your comments. We say thanks to those of you that's making your comments via the different social media platforms. We go back to the live telephone. Good morning, caller.
A person, good morning.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I have been listening very carefully to the explanation the police has been given concerning a person with his property and dogs in his yard. Take, for example, one comes in to steal, not during daytime, but probably nighttime. The dogs in that property bite the man, or how could the owner, I'm not seeing it, how could the owner be responsible for damage done to the man? In the first case, in my opinion, that person is trespassing. What does the law say about trespassing? If it's in the daytime, I could understand, okay, you call, and of course the man owning the property, or the person owning the property, put up a notice, beware of the dogs. But an odd time, an intruder comes into one's property to do harm, and he's bitten badly by the dog. How could the owner of the dog, if I'm hearing right, be responsible for the bites that the man got? Let me hear the officer on that.
Okay, so let me get the officer to clear the air on that, because I think, Corporal, you were quite specific in how we deal with that. But again, just for the purpose of the caller, if you can just clear the air on that again.
Yes, just go over what he said for me. I wasn't hearing too clearly again.
Addressing the issue of someone coming onto your property and they get bitten by the dog.
Right.
I think the point he was making, in which we addressed it initially, but I think his case is quite different. He's referring to if they come in on your property at some inappropriate time. Which to me that would be separate and apart from the initial conversation that we were having. Somebody on your property 2:00 in the morning. I would really like to hear him to explain, especially explain to the police what is it they were doing on your property. But you can comment.
Right. So someone being found 2:00 in the morning and they get bite by the dog. Right. Now I'm saying that, based on the circumstances, if it's a person who's coming in to commit a crime, if it's an offender, though, it would be more or less viewed under a civil point of view. If that person getting bit decides to take it up, nothing may come out of it, but the person does have a constitutional right to challenge whether or not the dog biting that person, biting him. Whether or not you get some sort of compensation for that. Even if,
detective, you're referring to they being bitten on your property. My property is fenced. My gate is closed. 2:00 in the morning, you open my front gate. You come into my property, and my dog, which is in an enclosed confine, bites you. The person still has a right under law to contest that.
To challenge that, I mean, based on whatever the situation is, but
that seems a bit
on that. On that, I can always clarify that.
Right.
And at a later stage, the person can always, if they want to have conversation, they can call in, and we can have a direct conversation on that. Yeah. So I could always research that and clarify certain points, but based on a case by case basis, it depends on whether or not something could come out of that.
Okay, thank you. We have
because you have to look at, for example, again, if that person is an intruder and they enter and dog bites them and kills them, what happens? You understand? So there is case by case basis.
Quite interested, and I think we probably need to have a separate program just for that.
Yes.
On this board. But we have another caller on the line. Good morning, caller. You're alive.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Wonderful, thank you.
The radio is not allowed.
I am not hearing it, but go ahead.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Tell me something, right? I've heard right. They had a discussion with a lawyer, right, on your station, right, and he was saying that if an intruder come to your house, right, and right, an intruder come to your house, and you right, and you inflict right, it come to steal from your house, right, and he right, and you go to okay, and he left running away from you, right. The lawyer was saying is that you shouldn't come behind him then. You should let him run because he's running away from you then. So let him, so allow him to run then because he's running away from you. But my thing is that okay, if he's allowed to do that, right, and he go to house A, house B, house A, house B, house C, and he continue to do that then, right? Right, every time he's allowed to run, to just run away then, right? He's running away from you. He's running away from danger, from you damaging him, okay. And he continues to run away. And each time, each house he's go right, each house he go to, he continues to do that then, right? To 1 house, 2 house, 3 house, 4 house, 5 house, and he continues to do that. Then what is the end to that then? Then how can we find an end to these things?
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Detective? Detective, your mic's muted.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm not hearing on the callers calling. So let's go over that for me, please.
I think he was just rehashing a conversation we had initially, but how do you deal and address if somebody enters your property and you're talking about if they are in flight, sometimes you instinctively want to assume that you should pursue them. So he's saying, what if it happens once, twice, 3 times? Isn't the case? So how does the law treat it?
Yes, we would recommend persons report matters. If you don't report something, then the police can't do anything about it. So if it happens the first time, the person runs off, you don't report it. It happens a second time, the person runs off again, you still don't report it. And it happens a third time, but this time you probably chase the person, catch them, and then maybe cause some sort of harm to them, or whatever the case might be. We're going to ask you, why didn't you report it the first 2 times? All right? So it's very important for us citizens to understand their responsibility in the whole crime prevention triangle.
And and I'm assuming there's also the reverse of it. If people may think about it seriously, you pursue them down the street. You catch up with them. You get into a tussle with them. And something happens to you.
It's really not recommended for persons to engage an intruder. Most intruders are repeat offenders, and most intruders, they are not afraid to do what they have to do to escape a situation, whether cause harm to you or whatever it is. It's safer for you to grab your phone and record something. If you want to stand out in the road while you're running away and you record that, and you try to call the police or have someone call the police in the meantime, and just get a good description of the person and let the police do what we have to do. We are the law enforcement personnel, we are the detectives, we are the persons who we go out there, we do the house searches, we capture the guys, we process and send the matters to court, and the court system does what they have to do to send persons to prison or to rehabilitate or whatever it is. So let the police do what we have to do, and you as a citizen do what you have to do by reporting, passing the information, and you contribute in that way to the holistic effort against the fight and crime prevention.
We have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I've been listening with great interest to this program, especially in relation to the laws that govern certain things, the response to intruders, for example. And I'm getting a sense from you, Joseph, definitely, that in some instances the law just may not be fair enough And I'd like to find out from the detective just what he thinks on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm sure you get the voice and you know me and my skills already. On a scale of 1 to 10, just how happy your guest is with how the law is set out in Grenada. Because sometimes it would seem that things are more on the side of the perpetrator than the law is on the side of the victim. Thank you.
Thank you. Detective?
Yes, just tell me again what that person was saying. Sorry, I'm not hearing the...
So again, the question, looking into the history, he's saying that very often it comes across as though the laws are very archaic, and sometimes you can't but help but argue that a lot of our laws need to be totally revised, and you get the sense that very often it is there to help not to protect the victim. She wanted to
I can totally understand how some victims would feel that when a certain offense is committed, they feel as though they're not receiving the amount of justice that they ought to, whether or not the law may be lenient or too lenient to certain offenders and so forth. Now, the law has been revised in 2010. There has been other amendments from 2010 to now. All right. There is also the new sentencing guidelines, and all of these is in an effort to rehabilitate. Because another part of crime prevention, when we really get deep into it, you would hear primary, secondary, and tertiary crime prevention. Tertiary, secondary involves rehabilitating persons and decreasing the incidence of recidivism, i.e. repeated offenders. So part of that, the criminal justice system, i.e. the magistrates' courts and high court, etc., would need to take into consideration sentencing guidelines for the purpose of rehabilitating and preventing reoccurrences of crime. So this is why you may find as a victim, you are not, in some cases, not all cases, you are not receiving the amount of justice that you think should be done in a particular incident. Every incident, every report has to be treated on a case-by-case basis. The facts are different. And for that reason, the caller and persons in the similar bracket would feel as though they may not receive. Also, you have to bear in mind that a lot of persons are seeking assistance from counsel, i.e. lawyers, to represent them in a lot of criminal cases.
Okay.
It's a part of the fundamental and constitutional right to receive such assistance from persons. And when you have a lawyer who goes through the cases with persons and they defend the clients, there are some really good lawyers. You would find that after going through the process of the trials and the courts and whatever it is, the court is placed in a situation where they have to balance off justice for the victim and also constitutional rights and rehabilitative measures for the accused.
But let me ask you, while you add to the, we're almost out of time. It means we'll have to revisit this. But I'm trying to strike a balance. You mentioned that a lot of these individuals, they are repeat offenders. So right. Isn't it that the system is failing us, detective? Because the issue...
I would not say that the system is failing. What I would say is that more needs to be done to have that better rehabilitative process. It's something that maybe we need to do a new study, because we have juvenile offenders going to the Bacolet facility, coming out and still continuing to repeat. Some of them feel as though it's a mini prison, So whether or not the rehabilitation of offenders is not the level it's supposed to be, should be something sought after under the relevant ministries and agencies to determine whether or not more needs to be done, whether or not they need to have more policies in place or more legislation. All right. Well, I would not say the system is failing. We are doing all that we can in the fight. But more can be done.
just to address to quickly, because we're literally out of time. You talk about a lot of persons that find themselves on the other side of the law. They're employing the services of lawyers. But is the services of the lawyers that's allowing them to get off, or is it more to do with possibly? Because I'm assuming as a detective, there is policies that must be satisfied. It can't just be a good lawyer getting them off, unless the law just has some serious anomalies.
Right. It has to do more with what we call precedents in the code. There are a lot of cases that lawyers reference to. This is on a case-by-case basis. Not necessarily there's a good lawyer or a bad lawyer. Not necessarily there's a good magistrate or a bad magistrate. There are checks and balances. There are guidelines that has to be followed. There is the law that has to be adhered to. So when you put all of these together and you look at the different things, I mean, I don't want to get into all of that. It's another subject. But once persons follow these guidelines and these rules, regulations, policies, and law, certain things may happen to a greater or a lesser degree. But just to summarize some of the crime prevention tips before we close off, since we're out of time, I want to just remind persons of some of these points. Ensure that your doors and windows are not only closed but locked. Use deadbolt locks. For example, you can use a double deadbolts where you can on a single door. Use sliding bolts, top and bottom of your door. Install burglar bars recommended on the inside of your building. Use metal doors and frames where you can. Use smooth tiles, and that's for footprint and fingerprint if we have to dust for those. Use a vault or a safe if you have that in your house, and you can cement or bolt it to your wall. You can keep your keys and other valuables away from the view. Install an alarm system. You can also have a surveillance camera system whereby you have a remote storage or even a motion sensor. Those are best. You have peripheral lights. Motion sensors are best. You get a dog or two, which is natural alarm system. They alert you and they also deter persons from coming onto your property. You employ security officers for your business places at nights and weekends, or you make your own checks. You fence your property. Also, you can maintain clean surroundings, establish a neighborhood watch program, and you can also perform a security audit. So these are some crime prevention tips. Contact numbers: the CID main office is 440-3921 or 405-2318. That's the WhatsApp line. CID South St. George 444-4454 and our cell phone 405-3961. Also, police emergency 440-3999 or 911.
There is the age-old 911, and I think from my experience in telecoms, I think 911 is a free call. I think 911.
Yes, that's right.
So you don't even have to worry about whether or not you have credit on your phone or not, because 911.
No, just dial it.
Just dial 911, and it actually goes through. Thank you, Corporal, Detective Corporal Terrell Jackasal. I know we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg, but I'm happy that we've started the conversation. Around you folks, you try your best to keep your home and your home and your property well protected, but also reminded that you try as much as possible not to take and engage the laws and take it into your own hands. Yes? Until then, so long everybody, to all our viewers, listeners, and those of you on the social media platform, Peter Mitchell, Ingrid Bourne, and the others, Judith Alexander. Indeed, it's a pleasure being here with you. Good morning, Alistair Warwood, Senior. You have yourself a wonderful day, and I'll be back with you on television at 11 o'clock for the televised edition of the Mid-Morning Buzz. Until then, so long. Take care. JC.